Yeah, there's nothing more appealing than an early Sunday morning. Standing in your beans that you labored over, and with God's will, it gave you ample rainfall. And there's just something almost, you won't find this spirit anywhere. You won't find it in a man-built church with some guy standing up talking over you, preaching the Lord. This is where the Lord lives, right here. I wish this country, this world, could experience what I feel right now. Because if they did, it'd be a hell of a lot better place. And I want to emphasize one thing right now. I don't plant kill plots. I plant food plots to grow things, from the smallest insect to the largest, and that would be the white-tailed deer. A kill plot, they got one of those about 600 miles from here. It's called downtown Chicago. They kill more things in that city than will be killed on my food plots in a given year. I guarantee you that. So try to steer clear of that word kill plot and get this real cemented in your mind. You ain't never going to hold deer on your property. That's not the genetic makeup of a wild deer. Unless you put 10-foot fence up, the deer are going to come and go, and that's what you want. There's 640 acres in a square mile. That deer can walk off that square mile probably in, a man can run it in under 5 minutes, so a deer can walk off of it in 3. And for you people that have never been out west where you can see the big scope of things, I can watch mule deer walk 2 miles in the morning from an alfalfa crop to their bed up in the high rock. And same way with antelope. But you don't see that here when you're in the dense forest. You just assume that behind every tree over there is your deer. Wrong. For those people that advocate that they're going to hold deer on their property, they're misleading the new hunter, and they're full of BS. They got more BS in them than I got fertilizer on my field, I can guarantee you that. Because at 68 years old, I know that you ain't holding deer on your property. Like I said, there's 640 acres in a square mile. So maybe if you had a continuous 2 square miles, but you're about 1,200 acres, you might have a chance of doing that. But then the scope of things is really going to open up. So don't get entranced into that. If you plant a food plot, you're going to hold deer. You don't want to hold deer. You want them to come and go. And lay off that word kill plot. Like I said, I don't plant a food plot to kill anything. I plant a food plot to grow things and admire my fruits of my labor and get out and work up a sweat by 7 o'clock in the morning. And I told one viewer I'm up at 5 and I'll work all day. So that's just the genetic makeup of the baby boom generation. But anyhow, enough for my rant, but I want to emphasize this. This is the fruits of your labor. 38-inch rows, they're canopied in. The corn is growing really good. It's in the tassel stage, and we got some predation on it, and you're going to expect that, and I'll walk up here and show you. Another interesting thing, you see all that looks like seed? That's all from the tassel of the corn. As you see, it falls out, and that falls down on the silk. Now as we walk along here, you'll see where the deer have found this appetizing also. They're tearing it off, and they're consuming it. But you're going to have that. I mean, that's just the way it's going to be. There's an ear that was in being formed, and this is the 15th day of June, so you're going to have that kind of predation. Now you notice the height of these beans. They're pretty good height, but we're going to wander back here in the back, and I can show you what will happen if you don't plant a lot of beans. 15th, the beans are knee high, and they're soaking wet. That's like drip irrigation, which is a good thing. So, a lot of them though, but you got to have a lot, because I'm going to show you the difference in the height here. These are knee high. Keep that in mind. Now we're going to walk down on the other end of the field. This is what will happen to when we plant beans for a food plot. And that was one good thing I did like about the power plant product. It had a forage bean in it, and it kept some of the pressure off the egg beans. You notice it's quite high. It's still knee high up here in the front. And we're talking right at 2 acres of beans in here. You know, I did tell one gentleman that I got a little owning land. It's not a blessing sometimes. He said he'd hunted for 50 years and he hadn't owned land. And you know, that's not a bad deal. Because owning land, you come with a lot of responsibility, like kicking weeds out at 7 o'clock in the morning, pulling velvet leaf. Whereas when you don't own land, none of that stuff happens. You just go hunting, which ain't all bad. Now here's what I wanted to show you. The browsing of the beans, where the deer come in here and forage them. Now, there's a little less than knee high here. Now, as we walk down here to the east, we'll notice, as I'm kicking out weeds as I go, the beans are quite a bit shorter. And you'll notice the culprit, the heavy browsing of the tops. And timber's right there. So to within 40 yards from the timber's edge, these beans have been browsed extensively. And that's what people are going to be faced with this heavy browsing. Now as we get down here, you'll notice the beans are only calf high. And that's going to happen regardless who, what, or what, unless you had a high fence to fence them out. And you get back in here, the beans have really been cropped down. Now, same field, keep in mind. As we get back here, now they're starting to flower down there. But now, you see, they're only boot high. And if I turn right around on my track, from up there at that thornwood tree back to here, you went from knee high to boot high. And a lot of predation. But keep in mind, that's protein. That's what the does are using right now for the milk with their young. And so you're doing your part. And the deer are doing what deer do. And that's why it's really critical to make sure you plant this area in here. I'll continue to let grow. And then I'll probably come in here in this area and take this out, because it's not going to make good beans per se, but it's already served its purpose of summertime browse and protein. So I'll come in here and plant this in August in a Baraska crop, and so I'll have the best of two worlds. Now, like I said, up front the beans are really good. Down here, it's just extensive browsing. Not clear to the ground, but they've done a lot of consumption. The reason I'm showing you that is I've had some people say their beans were clear to the ground. Yeah, they will be. If you go out and you only plant, well, I'd say this little area right here would be about 1/8 of an acre if it was that. They're going to eat that right to the ground. And it doesn't take too many deer to do that. One mama doe and her babies coming out grazing every night will get the job done, because they can graze 10-12 hours, and they'll consume a lot of your beans. So it's really important on the beans to make sure you plant ample acreage. I wouldn't plant anything under 2 acres. And so but that's going to happen to everybody that plants beans, because that's the nature of the beans. And like I said, my plan is I can eradicate that, feed them in the summer like a summer annual, And then I'll take them out here in August and I'll plant a fall annual. And boy, it's tropical out right now. Hedge apples are abundant again on this hedge tree. And as you've seen in the past, well, yeah, there's quite a few up in there. But right there on that limb, a tremendous amount. Another late season deer food. Here's a white oak. And as we look up in here, it's going to be, looks to me, an off year for the oaks. From the biggest to the smallest, as I always said. Well, during hunting season, what would that be to a beginning hunter? That's what food plotting is all about. The lone rabbit, but at least he has plenty to devour. We walk over here and see the predation from one to the other, to the cornfield. This has just been recently knocked down. And you're going to have that. You can see where the ear has been formed. The pollination basically is over with now. Pretty much so. But I'm going to show you people that don't quite understand that. As you get into this cornfield, you can see all that pollen. That's from the male part of the corn. That would be the tassel. Now after that heavy rain, you can see most of that pollen has been knocked off. Now as you come down here to the tassel, this would be the female part, and each one of these little hairs would be susceptible of growing a kernel of corn. As you can see, they put out a lot of pollen. And like I say, the heavy wet moisture brings them down, and that helps when you have these dewy mornings, cool mornings, that comes down and sticks onto the tassel. And it pollinates the corn a lot better. Now when you have a hot, dry year, that doesn't lay on the silk that long. The silk is what would be the female part. And like I said, you can look in here and see how far that pollen has came off the male part. And they're pretty much, well, the ones that stick up there, they're pretty much, well, about another day they'll be completely gone. So the pollination will be completed and the corn ear will be made. But I wanted to show you this. There is some destruction, but you're going to have that, so be prepared. That's why it's essential to make sure you get enough acreage so what predation comes doesn't devastate you. Well, that's going to put a wrap on the pollination of the corn. Some things that you learn: when it's cool and wet, the pollen from the male, from the tassel, will drop down on the silk, cling to the silk. When it's hot and dry, you don't get that good pollination because it just floats on off. And that's why sometimes when it's really hot and dry like last year, the pollination is mediocre. But on a year like this, you can just see the wet, damp air lets that pollen from the tassel drop down to the silk and does an excellent job of pollination. Got to learn a lot of things, and I know it's probably bores some people because they're not seeing big racks and big bucks, but this is a part of land management that will help you possibly have a big buck show up someday on your property, you know. And if it doesn't, you're still a winner, because like I say, I don't plant kill plots. Kill plots are in big downtown cities: LA, Chicago, St. Louis, you name it. They told me I couldn't even walk the streets of St. Louis in broad daylight. It must be one hell of a kill plot. So just keep that in mind when you're talking about food plots. Try to keep the kill part out of it, because you're hunting, not killing.